right? So let's start today's session. So today's session, we will continue the topic which we were discussing yesterday. Yesterday we learned like if we have to interact with the file using Java, and it's a read operation, right? Like how to do it. So we need to know about a couple of concepts. One, uh, for Java, the file needs to be acted like an object. For doing that, we use this class, file class, and we do it like this, right? We provide the path name of the file, and this converts your file into an object. Consider that like this, okay? Then, if you have to start reading from the file, there are only two different kind of outputs or ways which you can read through it. One is by characters, and second is by bytes. Okay, if you and so what we have is we have two modes, right? Either it could be characters, or it could be bytes, right? Again, one correction which I wanted to make is like it's not like I don't know, like I will have to check. Let's check one thing, like is it character by character, or is it like a block of character but with a small size? Okay, but the point is like you read it through either by characters or bytes only, right? And in this case, and this is one, again, this is one mode where you we don't use buffers here, right? Okay, what I mean by buffer is like not like we are not reading a good amount of characters or bytes, right, at once. We are not redoing it. As of now, we have not learned that, right? But the kind of outputs we receive is only this, characters or bytes, right? So if this is the way, we should be knowing about two classes. One class is file reader, which will help us to read from the characters, which is this, right? You need to provide the input of the file, right? The object which you created. And if you want to talk about bytes, it would be about file input stream. Okay, file input stream, and this also requires the input of your file. That's it. Both have a method called read, right? And then you need to provide the like in case of you're reading an character array, right? So you need to provide an input of character array to this. For this, it needs to be byte array. That's it. So after this operation, it will put everything which you have read into this byte, and then you can start maybe displaying or using that output. Okay, now today, right, we have to understand that today we will use the same approach. We have to do it characters and bytes, right? We have to read the data like this, but this time instead of doing one by one, we want to make use of buffers. Okay, buffers, cache, right? Whatever you want to say, you can call it, right? But what is happening here is that we need to read a block of data together. Okay, read a block of data together. And if I am not wrong, when I am saying a block of data, right, it is, I believe, 8192 or 8162 characters per read operation. Okay, so it reads these many characters at a single time, right? Similarly, when it comes to byte, there also it reads same number of bytes. Okay, so and for this, right, let me check how many characters it reads at once. I don't remember that part. Let's see how many characters characters are read at once using file reader in Java. Allows it to read a stream of characters. Okay, fine. But how many? When using the read method of file reader, it reads and returns a single character as an integer value representing the character's Unicode range. And then reach it returns this. See, I mean, it also says that it reads only a single character. So I think that is the correct understanding which I gave you yesterday, right? It only returns you a single character by character, right? It keeps reading it, but it is like for every operation it will go to the hard disk, read it from there, and then provide it to you, right? It will keep doing that operation and collect them together and then place it in the character in your array, right? That is how it works. And when it comes to the buffers part, right, there it does not happen like this. Okay, just to again make you aware about this, right? So let's just take a case of characters. So file reader helps you to read characters. So what happens? What is really happening is there is a file placed in your hard disk, right? Like this. This is your hard disk, and there is a file here. You ask this. You created the logic to read from a file. What it will do is the file reader, right? It will go to the file and then get one character from it, right? Like this, one character. It will again do the operation and get the character, one more character, right? It will keep doing this to fetch all the characters and all. In the end, it will have all the characters with it, right? After reading from the file. But you can see it is making so many iterations, right? Just to read all the characters, right? Because it is reading one character at a time. Okay. Consider this to be the other case where you will use the buffer part, right? Here what will happen is you still have that same file, right? The same file. So let's say if you have 100 characters there, right? 100 characters. So how many operations are required? Let's say 100 operations are required, right? You will ask for it. It will do that input output disk operation, right? And then fetch you a value and place it with the file reader, right? And that is in the end it will. So this will take a lot of time to collect all the data, okay, and lot of CPU power. In case of buffer, right, what happens is a memory space is created in the a cache is created in the memory, okay, in the memory. What happens is you there is a class called buffered file reader, right? I think that is the what is the name it is for the characters part. What it will do is it will make a request for this to be read, right? And what it will do is it will place, right, a chunk of data at once in the memory, right? So it will place 8162 characters at once, right? Per request. Okay. So per request, it will make a request to the file. It will get these many characters and place it in the memory. And now when it is required to be used, it will use it from there. Okay. It will use it from there. Okay. Now what happens is you have skipped. I mean, it's a better approach, right? You can see you are just taking just one attempt on your hard disk, which requires only one input output operations, right? That needle change and the CPU power to read from the hard disk, right? See, reading from a hard disk is a very expensive operation, so we should be very mindful when we are doing that part. Okay, we should try to make it as minimized as we can. And using this memory concept, right? We will what we are doing is we are reading it once and we are getting so many characters at once, and it will put it here. So if we say about this case, right? File reader like 100 characters, right? We have to read. So similarly, if you have 100 characters again, you can see you just required only one operation and everything would be there in the memory itself. And when it has to be used in the code, it would be used from this place, which is this memory, right? Nowhere else. Okay. This is how it is done. And you make use of it, right? And that's why it is more preferred approach to use this buffer part, right? Now let's look at those classes which will help us achieve this. So again, we have to talk about in terms of characters and bytes, right? But this time using the buffers, right? It will create a buffer in the memory to store all this information from a file. Which classes will help us to do this, right? Okay. Let me just write without buffer. What was the class name? The class name was file reader. Okay, I think this was the name file reader. In case with buffer, right? The class name which you have to use is buffered reader. Okay, buffered reader. If you have to use the bytes part, the class used was file input stream, right? If you have to use with buffer, the class name is buffered input stream. Okay, buffered input stream. Okay, you can see just replacing file with buffer. That is the part, right? File with buffer. Otherwise, the name is same. Okay. Now let's use this class and see how it works, right? If you remember yesterday, right? If you have to use these two, right? How you use it? You create a file object, right? File object, new file, and you pass this file object to these, right? That's it. To this or this. In case of buffered reader, right? What is required is it's a three-step process. It was two-step process here, right? Do this part and then do this part, right? In case of buffered reader, it's a three-step process. How it is done is First, again, you will use this part only. You will create a file object. So we are good with the first step. The second step is, right, you will have to create an instance of this class. Okay. And then in third step, you will create the instance of this class. Okay. I'll just show you first, then it will make more sense. So it's like a wrapper on top of these kind of readers, right? And that is how it works. So let's go here and let me put this thing at least in a different method. Okay, just as okay, public void read data uh, read data from file as bytes without using buffer. Let me also make a checkout. Let me also commit my changes. Just a second. Terminal. We're talking about git add git commit -m changes and git push origin day 27. Okay, so this is done. uh, okay, and now let's create our own branch for today. Git checkout -b day 28. And what we'll do is we will go up now and let's create our work, right? So here what I will do is, first thing is I need to have the access to the same file, right? So I will first I will first create my normal file into an object by doing this. PHP. Right. The second thing which I will do is I will again and I want to do the operation for characters, right? So I want to say I am doing this part, character buffer, right? This is what I want to do. Now let's first look at the class, right, which is of our interest, which is buffered reader. So this is the class which we have to use. Let me write it as br equals to new buffered reader, right? And it requires an input. What kind of input does it need? Let's see. It needs an input of reader class, right? You can see, right? It needs an input of reader class. What was the reader class? If I remember the class which we were using yesterday, right? Which was what? File reader. Sorry. Okay, just a second. Reader, right? What is reader here, right? Reader is not a class, it's an interface. Okay, reader is an interface. As far as I remember, right? Let's check that. And the class which we were using yesterday was this, right? Let me just create this class also. File reader. So this is the part which we were doing yesterday, and we were passing it file here. So if we do this, let me just surround it to a drop like this, right? Now what? So this is required for what? This is required for character without buffer, right? This is the part which we were doing yesterday, to read data as characters but without buffer. But let's go there in the file reader. If you go into the file reader class, which class it implements? It implements a class called input stream reader. And if you go inside this class, right, which which, okay, this is also a class only, right? Reader is a class. Okay, great. But it's an abstract class. Okay. So what is happening is, if you try to understand the hierarchy here, see, file reader was the class which we were using. This was a class, and this is helping us to read characters. Okay, this is helping us to read characters. Okay, fine. The above class, above this was in file input stream, I believe. What was the name? Input stream reader. Input stream reader. This was also a class, right? And there was a class above this which is a reader class, but it's an abstract class, and it is implementing two interfaces. One is readable and second is closable. Okay, these are two interfaces here, right? But this is the hierarchy. Yesterday we were using this. Now I told you that if you have to read data by read characters, right, in buffer, if you have to use this, you have to use this class, which is what? Buffered reader. Okay, buffered reader, right? Let's first understand the hierarchy of this class also. If you look at this class, let's go there. Buffered reader, right? You can see this class is also extending the reader class, right? It is also extending the reader class. So if we go back, and reader is again the same thing, right? You can see the same abstract class, right? The same abstract class. Let me go it down. So buffered reader, right? You can understand like this is this. Okay. This class over here, right? The reader abstract class has two subclasses within it, right? I mean, the child classes, right? One is input stream reader and second is the buffer reader. Okay. And when you wanted to create the instance of the file reader, it accepts an input of file type, right? This type. So this is the one which accepts the input of file type. And if you would look at the constructor call of buffer reader, it needs an input of reader type. Reader type, right? Okay. Now, what can you provide here? If I have to run this, I can provide this class. I can create an instance of this class and provide this. But wait, it's an abstract class. You cannot create an instance of it, right? You cannot create an instance of it. But can I do this? Can I create the instance of input stream reader and then provide it here? Will it be counted as a reader? Yes, it will, right? So see here, what I'm saying is, what you if you have to provide an input to this class, right, to call the constructor of it, it needs a reader input, right? What is that? See this. You can see, right? It needs a reader input, right? If it needs a reader input, what is required is either you should be able to create an instance of the reader class like this, new reader, but we know this is not possible because reader is an abstract class. So you cannot do this. But what can you do? Can you do something like this? Reader R equals to new input stream reader. We can do this, right? Similarly, I can do this part. New file reader, right? Like this. Reader here. Similarly, if I write this file reader, fr equals to new file reader, right? This will also work, right? And we know this is a parent, right? So a parent can accept a child to be given to this, right? So if I provide this file reader to this will also work then, because file reader is a type of reader only, right? Any question on this part? Are we clear on this? Right? I hope we are clear on this, right? Now, what is required is, so I'm just trying to explain you like why why I need to create an instance of file reader still, right? Okay. Why it is required is because buffered reader in the constructor call requires an input of reader type, right? And file reader is a child of reader class, right? So even if you create the instance of this and provide this here, right, it will work. Okay. Or you can create the instance of this and provide this, right? But since we already know about this class, right, and we are happy to use it, let's use this only, right? So let's go there and let's start implementing. So I told you it's a three-step process, right? When it comes to buffer reader, it's a three-step process. First step is create the file object. So you created this, right? You did this new file and the file path. You will give this. Then what you need to do is you need to create the instance of the file reader, like how you were doing earlier, right? In the case of without buffer part, you will do this. And here what you will do is file reader, and then you will provide this object here, right? Inside this. Now you will create the instance of the buffered reader. You can consider this operation is like a wrapper around this file reader. Okay, file reader, buffer reader equals to new buffered reader. Okay, and here in the inputs you will provide this object fr. And now what will happen is this time it will use a buffer to read your data to read your characters from the file. Okay, but it's a three-step process. Whereas When you wanted to do without buffer, it was a two-step process. One was this, and second was this. File reader fr equals to new file reader. Okay, file part. So there is nothing very new about it, right? As part of the process, you can see the two steps are same as you have learned earlier, but the third step is required is it needs an input of this thing, right? And you need to use of the class called buffer reader. Okay, if you're talking about characters to be read, let's implement this. So we wanted to read here, right? So we have already created an instance of the file reader. We are good with this. Let's create the instance of the buffer reader. Okay, we have already done that. Let me grab it. And you can see it needs an input of reader class, right? What I will do is I'll provide fr because it's a child class of the reader, right? And you can see there is no problem for this, right? It accepted this. Now what we need is we need to perform the read operation. The read operation is same as earlier. Just use this part, okay? And we need to create the character of this. Let me create the character array. You can see rest of the operations are same, right? There is nothing new about it. Okay, and we will just provide ch here, and it needs to add a new catch clause. Let me edit, and we are good. So we have read the so all our data would be read here, right, in the file in this character array. And now we just need to skim through it. How do we skim through it? Let me just copy the code. Right, I'll just read the value one by one, right, for the characters. And now once I will be done through it, right, I told you whenever you're working with a file, make sure that you're closing it, right? In over here, you will have to close at two levels. One, the buffer level, you need to close that buffer, and then you also need to close that file. Okay, that operation which you are reading through it. So what you will do is first you will say br dot close, and then you will also say fr dot close. And let's run this. Right, let's run this now. We should be able to see the same output, right? You can see. Okay, there is no change in the output, but it's just this time what is happening is you're reading it into a buffer first, and then consuming it, right? Okay, so this is the part of the characters. Very similarly, you will do it for the bytes also, right? Mm, but for the byte, we have to use a different class. Let me just grab it and place it in a different method. Control X. Let me create a method for it. Public void read data from file as characters with buffers. Okay. Now let's do it with bytes as buffers. Okay. We have already seen how to use it characters, and we did that. Again, for the bytes, the process is same, right? But the classes which are used is different, right? In case of the byte, right, we were using file input stream, right, to read this, and this time we will use buffered input stream for the buffered part. Let's start looking into this, right? Let me create the instance of the file class. So this is done. Now, how what we were doing was we were doing file input stream, and we were saying FIS equals to new file input stream, and we were providing the input of file A, right? And we'll have to add the catch clause, the try catch condition, which we did, and then we were working using it. We were using it, right, in our class. Okay, the class which we have to talk about now is the buffered input stream, right? This is the class BIS equals to new buffered input stream, and you can see what kind of input it needs. It needs an input of input stream, right? Let's talk about this part again, right? If you look at this class, right, file input stream, the class part, what is this class is made of? We did not look at the structure of this class yesterday. Let me clear this. So when it comes to read as a byte, right, we have a class called file input stream. It's a class, and this class needs it's an is extending one more class, which is input stream. Okay, input stream. It is also a class. I think it's a class or an abstract class. Let's see. It's an abstract class, right? It's an abstract class, and it is implementing an interface called closable, right? So we were doing this, right? So this was the part we were doing. And then if you look at this class, right, the one which you want to know, which we want to use now for the buffered part. Let's go there, and you can see what kind of input it needs. It needs an input of input stream, right? And let's look at this class. Where this class is coming from? This class is an extension of filter input in stream. Okay, let me start creating it. So there is a class called buffered input stream. This is the class which is value for us, but this class is implementing another class which is filter input stream. Filter input stream, which is also a class. And if you go inside this class, what it is doing is it is extending another class which is input stream. So what it is doing is it is like this, right? Input stream. So this class over here, right, has two childs. One is this, and second is this, and this is like a grandchild of this input stream, right? Okay. And when you want to create the instance of this class, right, buffered input stream, right, you can see it needs an input of input stream. Okay, it needs an input of input stream. This part, right, input stream. It needs an input of this class. So either I can create the instance of this class like this, right? Input stream is equals to new input stream. But wait, I cannot do this because it's a abstract class. I cannot do this, right? This is not possible. So what is possible is I can assign this value, either I can create the instance of this file input stream or filter input stream, right? Or the buffered input stream. But buffered input stream needs some input, right? So you cannot just create an instance of buffered input stream and then provide this to this itself, right? No. What we have to do is, and again, filter input stream is of not use for us. We will use this class. Okay. What I will do is I will do something like this: file new file input stream, right? And I can write it like this, or I can write here file input stream FIS equals to this value, right? And now I can provide this file input stream instance to here, right? Because it accepts input stream. So file input stream is like, if you create the instance of it, you can provide it to its parent, right? Which is this. So what I'll do here is, again, I have already, by writing this line, you want to read uh, bytes, right? Without buffer, right? You need to create this. And now if you want to, if your intention is to read through buffers, what you have to do is read bytes with buffers. And here you will provide this FIS. And that's it. Okay. So you can see, again, it's just an one step, additional step which you're taking, but you have to understand the flow, like why you are providing only FIS, why nothing else, right? That is where I'm trying to explain you the complete hierarchy of the classes. Okay. So you can understand, like, whenever you have to read through buffers, it's like a wrapper on top of your normal process, which is without buffers, right? So you will understand, like, it's a wrapper around this. Okay. And now the same part is required. You will say FIS dot read, and it requires an byte array. We say byte pt equals to new byte. It will be 50 characters, let's say 50 bytes, sorry. And here you will provide bt. And let's add a catch clause for this. And now I need to skim through it. uh, byte b bt, and we'll say s out. We will print b. Okay. And once we are done through this, again we need to close the connections. So I will first close the buffered input stream, right? For the FB, it has to be BIS. I'll close this, and then I will close the file input stream connection. Okay, and now we are good. Let's read this. We should see the output as bytes, right? The similar output as we were seeing in the earlier case also, right? But this time the value is coming by first getting placed in a buffer and then given to us. If you want to change this into a character, you can simply do this. I can even simply do this operation here itself. Will it work? It will not. Okay, it will work, right? So let's run this. This time it should print characters, right? You can see. Okay, the conversion of byte to characters is like how it is done, right? So again, I'm saying you have to understand, right? Let me just mention what we have learned till now, right? We have talked about file read operation, and here we have learned that during your file read operation, right, you can only read data in two formats, right? In two forms. One, the characters, and second is in the form of bytes, right? I told you why you should use characters or bytes, right? Ideally you would always be using bytes, okay, because it supports, it is good enough for all both kind of files, right? One file could be a text based file, and second could be a non text file, right? When I say non text files, it is like an image, video, right? PNG, right? MP4, right? Whereas in case of text based, it's like .txt, .xlsx, right? Where you can read the text, where the text written makes sense, right? It's in plain English. But in this case, right, you will, if you open this file in a notepad, right, none of them will make any sense. You will not be able to understand any of this, right? And if you have to read something like this, right, you should be using bytes format. When it comes to use to text based, you should use in the character format. But since this can be read through both the parts, like characters also and bytes also, and they will make sense, and this will only make sense by reading bytes. So you can see byte is common. So most preferably the people use only bytes, right? This part, right? Now I told you, even to do this operation, there are two modes. Either you can read without buffer, right, and with buffer, right, which is the second option, right? Okay. In case of buffer, without buffer, you have to just create one thing, use the instance of the file, create the instance of a file, do this, and then you need to use the class called file reader, fr new file reader, and provide this file object to this, right? This over here. That's it. In case of buffer, right? If you have to use, you need to do what? You have to use uh, buffered reader, right? Buffered reader. Buffered reader is like a wrapper on top of it, okay? Which you're placing on top of your normal without buffer thing, right? So buffered reader, and it needs new buffered reader, and you will provide this object to this inside this. That's it. And this is for the characters part, right? For the bytes, the class used is input, I think file input stream, right? File input stream. And in this case, it is buffered input stream, right? So how many classes we learned as part of this process? One class, two class,